The mining colony of Vega 7 had never been a quiet place. But today, the chaos reached a level that nobody had expected or prepared for. Sergeant Daniel Carter crouched behind a collapsed storage unit, his rifle pressed against his chest as explosions rocked the facility around him. The Kreth Raiders had come without warning, their ships dropping from the sky like metal locusts hungry for destruction and valuable hostages. He had been stationed here for 6 months as part of a small security team assigned to protect diplomatic visitors. And until today, the job had been almost boring. Now he wished for that boredom to return. "All units, this is command." A voice crackled through his earpiece. "We have confirmed hostiles in sectors 4 through 9. Priority 1 is the diplomatic delegation." Repeat. Priority 1 is protecting the delegation. Daniel cursed under his breath and checked his ammunition. The diplomatic delegation included Princess Alindra Version, the youngest daughter of the Version Dominion's ruling family, and if the Kreth captured her, the political consequences would shake the entire galaxy. He moved through the smoke-filled corridors, stepping over debris and fallen equipment. Somewhere ahead, he could hear screaming and the sharp crack of energy weapons. The Kreth were not known for their mercy, and every second he wasted could mean another life lost. A young technician stumbled out of a side room, blood running down her face from a cut on her forehead. Daniel grabbed her arm and pulled her behind cover. "The escape pods," he said quickly. "Go to Section 12 and get to the escape pods." "Can you make it?" She nodded, her eyes wide with fear, and he watched her run before continuing his advance toward the diplomatic wing. The corridor ahead had partially collapsed, and Daniel had to climb over twisted metal and broken concrete. His armor scraped against the debris, and every sound felt too loud in the chaos. He expected a Kreth soldier to appear at any moment, but luck seemed to be with him so far. Then he heard it. A voice calling out in a language he did not understand, followed by harsh laughter that could only belong to the raiders. Daniel moved faster, his training taking over as he navigated the wreckage. He rounded a corner and found himself looking into a mining tunnel that branched off from the main facility. Emergency lights flickered overhead, casting everything in shades of red and shadow. At the far end of the tunnel stood 3 Kreth soldiers, their gray skin and sharp teeth visible even in the dim light. They had backed someone against the wall, and Daniel felt his stomach drop when he recognized the elegant silver robes of the Version royal family. Princess Alindra looked nothing like the composed dignitary he had glimpsed during the welcome ceremony. Her violet eyes were wide with terror, and her pale blue skin had gone almost white. She held her hands up in a gesture of surrender, but the Kreth soldiers were laughing, clearly enjoying her fear. "Step away from her," Daniel shouted. Raising his rifle and taking aim at the nearest raider, the Kreth turned, surprised by the interruption. The largest one snarled and raised his weapon, but Daniel was faster. His first shot caught the raider in the chest, and the alien went down with a grunt of pain. The other 2 opened fire, and Daniel dove behind a support beam as energy bolts scorched the air around him. He returned fire, catching another raider in the shoulder, but the third one had moved closer to the princess, using her as a shield. "Drop your weapon, human," the Kreth growled, pressing a blade against Alindra's throat. "Or I will paint these walls with her royal blood." Daniel's mind raced. He could not get a clean shot without risking the princess, and if he surrendered, they would both be dead or worse. Alindra's eyes met his across the tunnel, and he saw something shift in her expression. Fear gave way to a desperate hope, and she mouthed a single word that he somehow understood. Now she threw her elbow back into the Kreth's stomach with surprising force, and the raider stumbled. Daniel fired without hesitation, and his shot caught the alien in the head. The Kreth dropped, and Alindra scrambled away from the body with a cry of relief. "Your Highness," Daniel said, moving toward her quickly. "Are you hurt?" "No," she said, her voice shaking but steady. "I am unharmed." "You saved my life, "Human, we need to move," he replied. "Checking the tunnel behind them. More will be coming. And this section is not stable," as if to prove his point. The ceiling groaned above them, and dust rained down as the structure shifted. The earlier explosions had weakened the supports, and the whole tunnel could collapse at any moment. Daniel grabbed the princess's arm and started running. She stumbled in her formal robes, not designed for escape or combat, but she kept pace with him as best she could. They were halfway to the main corridor when the ceiling gave way. Daniel did not think. He simply reacted. He threw himself over the princess, covering her body with his own, as tons of rock and metal came crashing down around them. Pain exploded through his back and shoulders as debris struck him. Something sharp cut through his armor and into his side, and he felt warm blood begin to pool beneath him. But he did not move, keeping his body between the princess and the destruction above. The rumbling stopped, and for a moment there was only silence and darkness. "Soldier," Alindra whispered beneath him. "Soldier, can you hear me?" Daniel tried to respond, but the words would not come. His vision was going dark at the edges, and he could feel his strength fading with every heartbeat. "Stay with me," she pleaded, her hands pressing against his wounds. "Help will come. You must stay with me." He managed to lift his head just enough to look at her. Even covered in dust and blood, she was beautiful in a way that seemed almost unreal. Her violet eyes shimmered with tears she refused to let fall. "Stay safe," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Your Highness." Then the darkness claimed him, and Daniel Carter knew nothing more. Rescue teams found them 20 minutes later. The princess was unharmed, protected by the body of the human soldier who had given everything to save her. Medics rushed to stabilize Daniel while others helped Alindra to her feet. She watched them carry him away. Her heart pounding with emotions she could not name. An elderly advisor approached her, his face grave with concern and something else. Something that looked almost like fear. "Your Highness," he said quietly, "do you understand what has happened here today?" "A soldier saved my life," she replied, still watching the medics work on Daniel's broken body. "It is more than that," the advisor said. "By our ancient laws, you now owe him a life debt. This bond has not been invoked in over 3,000 years, but the law is clear. You are bound to him until the debt is repaid." Alindra turned to face her advisor, and for the first time since the attack began, her expression shifted from fear to something harder and more determined. "Then I will honor the debt," she said, "whatever it demands." She looked back toward the medical shuttle where Daniel lay fighting for his life, and she made a silent promise to the unconscious soldier. He had saved her without thought for his own safety. She would not forget that sacrifice, and she would not rest until her debt was paid in full. 3 weeks had passed since the attack on Vega 7, and the galaxy had not stopped talking about what happened there in the Grand Council chamber of Thelvara, the Vartian Dominion's ancient capital world. Princess Alindra stood before her people and spoke words that would change everything. "I declare before this council and all the noble houses," she announced, her voice steady and clear, "that I have incurred a life debt to the human soldier who saved me from the Kreth raiders. By our sacred laws, I am bound to repay this debt in full." Silence fell over the chamber like a heavy blanket. The assembled nobles stared at her with expressions ranging from shock to outrage. No one had expected this, and no one knew how to respond. High Matriarch Alindra Version, Alindra's grandmother and the supreme ruler of the Dominion, rose slowly from her throne. Her silver hair cascaded down her shoulders like a waterfall of moonlight, and her ancient eyes burned with barely contained fury. "You would bind yourself to a human?" she demanded, her voice echoing through the chamber. "You would shame our family by invoking laws that have not been used in 3,000 years?" "The law exists, grandmother," Alindra replied, refusing to look away from those piercing eyes. "It does not matter how long it has been since someone invoked it. I owe this man my life, and our honor demands that I repay him. Consul Varith, the Dominion's chief legal scholar, stepped forward with a tablet in his trembling hands. He was old even by Versian standards. His blue skin faded to a pale gray, but his mind remained as sharp as ever. The princess speaks the truth, he said reluctantly. The law of life debt is clear. When one saves another from certain death, a bond is formed. The one who was saved must serve the one who saved them until the debt is repaid in equal measure. And how does one repay such a debt? The High Matriarch asked coldly. By saving the life of the one who saved her, Varith explained, or by fulfilling a need of equivalent value. Only then is the debt considered settled. Murmurs spread through the council chamber as nobles whispered among themselves. Some looked at Alindra with pity, others with disgust, and a few with something that might have been respect for her. Courage, the High Matriarch, descended from her throne and approached her granddaughter. When she spoke, her voice was low enough that only Alindra could hear. This is political madness. Our enemies will use this against us. They will say the royal family has become weak, that we bow to humans now. Then let them say what they wish. Alindra whispered back, I will not abandon my honor to satisfy their opinions. This soldier nearly died for me, grandmother. He did not know me. He had nothing to gain, yet he threw himself into danger without hesitation. Does that not deserve recognition? The High Matriarch studied her granddaughter for a long moment, and something in her expression softened just slightly. You have always been the most stubborn of my grandchildren, she said finally. Go then, if you must. Fulfill your debt and return home. But remember who you are, Alindra. Remember that you carry the honor of our entire house upon your shoulders. Alindra bowed her head in acknowledgement across the vast darkness of space. On Earth's moon, Daniel Carter opened his eyes for the first time in 3 weeks. The hospital room was white and clean, filled with the soft beeping of medical equipment and the gentle hum of life support systems. He tried to move, but pain flared through his body, and he groaned. Easy there, Sergeant, a familiar voice said. You have been through quite an ordeal. Commander Laura Bennett stepped into his field of vision. Her short brown hair slightly disheveled, and her uniform wrinkled as if she had been waiting here for a long time. She smiled at him, relief evident in her tired eyes. Commander, Daniel managed to say, his throat dry and scratchy. What happened? Where am I? You are at Armstrong Medical Center on Luna Base, she explained, pulling a chair closer to his bed. You have been in a coma for 3 weeks. The doctors were not sure you would wake up. Memories came flooding back. The attack, the Kreth Raiders, the collapsing tunnel, and the princess with her violet eyes and terrified expression. The delegation, he said urgently. Trying to sit up despite the pain. Princess Alindra, is she safe? Bennett gently pushed him back against the pillows. She is fine, thanks to you. In fact, she has been asking about your condition every day since the attack. She seems quite concerned about the human who saved her life. Daniel relaxed slightly, letting himself sink back into the bed. The mission had succeeded, even if it had nearly cost him everything. You are being awarded the Silver Star for valor. Bennett continued. The brass is very impressed. A single soldier taking on 3 Kreth Raiders and saving an alien princess. That is the kind of story that makes the news feeds. I was just doing my job, Daniel said quietly. You were doing much more than that. And you know it, Bennett replied. Not many would have risked their lives the way you did. The princess certainly noticed. Over the following days, Daniel slowly recovered. The doctors told him that his injuries had been severe, that without the advanced medical technology available on Luna Base, he would have died. The debris had shattered 3 ribs, punctured a lung, and caused internal bleeding that required multiple surgeries to repair. He spent his time reading. watching news feeds and enduring physical therapy sessions that left him exhausted and aching. The boredom was almost worse than the pain. But at least he was alive then, on his 10th day of consciousness. He received an unexpected visitor. The door to his hospital room opened, and Princess Alindra Vershin walked in. She wore a simple traveling cloak instead of her royal robes, but there was no mistaking her. Those violet eyes and blue skin were burned into his memory. "Sergeant Carter," she said formally, approaching his bed with a grace that seemed almost unnatural. "I hope I am not intruding, Your Highness," Daniel replied, surprised and confused. "I did not expect to see you here. Should you not be back home with your family?" "I should be many places," she said, a hint of something sad in her voice. "But my duty brings me here, to you." She knelt beside his bed, a gesture that shocked him more than anything else. Princesses did not kneel before common soldiers, not in any culture he knew of, by the sacred laws of my people. Alindra declared, "I owe you a life debt. You saved my life at the risk of your own, and until I have repaid that debt in equal measure, I am bound to serve you." Daniel stared at her, completely lost for words. "I do not understand," he said finally. "You do not owe me anything. I was just doing what any soldier would do." "Perhaps that is true for humans," Alindra replied, rising to her feet. "But for my people, such a sacrifice cannot go unacknowledged. Until I save your life as you saved mine, or until I fulfill a need of equivalent value, I belong to you. I do not want anyone to belong to me," Daniel said firmly. "That is not how things work where I come from." Alindra met his eyes, and he saw the steel behind her gentle expression. "The debt is not about what you want, Sergeant. It is about what honor demands. And my honor will not let me walk away from this obligation." She stood tall, her decision made and her path clear. "I will remain by your side until the debt is paid. That is my promise, and that is my duty." Daniel looked at the alien princess standing in his hospital room. Bound to him by laws he did not understand, and he realized that his life had just become far more complicated than he ever could have imagined. Cedar Falls, Iowa was not the kind of place where one expected to find alien royalty. Yet here, Princess Alindra stood, staring at a cornfield with an expression of complete bewilderment. "This is your home?" she asked, turning to Daniel with confusion written across her features. "This is where the human who defied death to save a princess was raised." Daniel laughed despite himself. It was the first genuine laugh he had managed since waking up in that hospital bed. And it felt good. "Not all heroes come from grand palaces, Your Highness," he replied, leaning on his cane as he walked toward the small farmhouse at the end of the dirt road. "Some of us come from places like this." 2 months had passed since that strange conversation in his hospital room. Daniel had been discharged from the military medical center and given leave to recover at home, and true to her word, Alindra had followed him every step of the way. She was accompanied by Thal Rick, her personal guard, a massive Vertian warrior who looked at humans the way one might look at particularly annoying insects. He did not approve of this mission, that much was clear, but his loyalty to the princess kept him silent and obedient. The door of the farmhouse burst open, and a young woman came running out. She had Daniel's brown eyes and the same stubborn set to her jaw, and she threw herself at him with a cry of joy that echoed across the fields. "Danny!" Grace Carter shouted, hugging her brother tightly. "I was so worried about you. The news said you almost died. Why did you not call me more often?" "I was a little busy being unconscious," Daniel replied with a grin, hugging her back despite the pain it caused his still healing ribs. Grace pulled back and noticed the alien standing behind her brother. Her eyes went wide, and her mouth fell open in shock. "Is that," she whispered, "is that actually a real alien princess?" "Grace, this is Princess Alindra Vershin of the Vertian Dominion," Daniel said with a sigh. She has decided that she owes me a life debt and refuses to leave until she has paid it. Alindra, this is my sister Grace. Alindra stepped forward and performed a formal bow. It is an honor to meet you. Your brother is a remarkable human. Grace squealed with excitement and grabbed Alindra's hands. Oh my gosh, this is amazing. I have so many questions. What is your planet like? Do you really live for hundreds of years? Is your skin naturally that color, or is it some kind of makeup? Grace, Daniel warned, but Alindra smiled. I am happy to answer your questions, the princess said. It is refreshing to meet someone who shows curiosity rather than fear or suspicion. The days that followed were strange and often difficult. Alindra had spent her entire life in palaces surrounded by servants who attended to her every need. She had never cooked a meal, cleaned a room, or done any of the ordinary tasks that humans took for granted. Daniel found her one morning, standing in front of the kitchen stove, staring at a frying pan as if it were some kind of alien technology. What are you doing? He asked, amused despite himself. I am attempting to prepare breakfast for you, she replied without looking away from the pan. The life debt requires that I serve you, and I have observed that humans consume a morning meal. However, I am unsure how to proceed. Daniel walked over and gently took the pan from her hands. You do not need to cook for me. The debt is already paid as far as I'm concerned. It is not, Alindra said stubbornly, and I will not accept your charity. Teach me how to do this. So he taught her. He showed her how to crack eggs without getting shells in the yolk, how to flip pancakes without launching them across the kitchen, and how to make coffee strong enough to wake the dead. She failed spectacularly at first, but she never gave up. And eventually, she managed to produce a breakfast that was actually edible. Grace thought the whole situation was hilarious. She appointed herself as Alindra's guide to human culture, dragging the princess to movies, shopping malls, and local restaurants. Alindra learned about pizza and ice cream, about television and social media, about the strange customs of small-town America. But not everyone in Cedar Falls was happy about the alien presence. Mayor Kevin Holloway saw political opportunity in the princess's visit and tried to arrange publicity events that would boost his own profile. Reporters from across the country descended on the town, eager to capture images of the alien royalty living among ordinary humans. Daniel hated the attention. He had never wanted to be famous, and the constant presence of cameras and journalists made him feel like an animal in a zoo. Alindra handled it with the grace of someone raised in the public eye, but he could see the strain it put on her one evening. After a particularly exhausting day of avoiding reporters, they sat together on the farmhouse porch, watching the sun set over the cornfields. Grace had gone to bed. Thalrex stood guard at a respectful distance, and for the first time, they were truly alone. May I ask you something? Alindra said quietly. Of course, Daniel replied. Why did you do it? She asked, turning to face him. You did not know me. You had no obligation to risk your life. Yet you threw yourself into danger without hesitation. Why? Daniel was silent for a long moment, considering his answer. Where I come from, he said finally. We are taught that protecting others is not about obligation or debt. It is about doing what is right because it is right. I saw you in danger, and I knew I could help. That was enough. Alindra shook her head slowly. My people would call that reckless. We do not act without calculation, without considering the consequences and the costs. Maybe that is the difference between us. Daniel said with a small smile. Humans do not always think before we act. Sometimes we just follow our hearts and hope for the best. It sounds terrifying, Alindra admitted. It can be, Daniel agreed. But it can also be beautiful. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Alindra pointed out constellations that were visible from her home world, and Daniel showed her the ones he had learned as a child. Two people from different worlds, finding common ground in the vastness of the universe. Their peace was shattered when Thulrek approached with a communication device in his hand. His expression was grim. "Your Highness," he said. "An urgent message from Thelvara." Alindra took the device and read the contents. Daniel watched her face go pale, her violet eyes widening with concern. "What is it?" he asked. "My grandmother," she whispered. "She has fallen ill. The healers say her condition is serious. And there are rumors of political enemies moving against our family." She stood abruptly, her whole demeanor shifting from relaxed to regal in an instant. "I must return home," she said. "My family needs me." Daniel stood as well, ignoring the protest from his healing wounds. "Then go. Your family is more important than any debt." Alindra looked at him with something unreadable in her eyes. "The debt remains unfulfilled," she said softly. "I have not saved your life. I have not repaid what you gave me. Forget the debt," Daniel insisted. "Some things are more important." She reached out and took his hand, a gesture that seemed to surprise both of them. "I will return," she promised. "When my family is safe, I will come back and finish what I started." "You have my word." Daniel Carter. It was the first time she had used his first name, and the sound of it on her lips stayed with him long after her ship disappeared into the night sky. He stood on the porch until the stars blurred together, wondering if he would ever see her again, and hoping more than he wanted to admit that he would. The Versian Dominion's capital city stretched beneath Alindra's shuttle like a glittering jewel of spires and crystalline towers, but she found no comfort in its familiar beauty. Something was wrong, and she could feel it in her bones when she landed at the royal palace. She was met not by the usual honor guard, but by a small group of servants who hurried her through back corridors and hidden passages. The message was clear without words. Danger lurked in the shadows, and the throne itself was under threat. She found her grandmother in the private healing chambers, lying pale and still upon a bed, surrounded by medical technology that hummed with soft blue light. Healer Narration stood nearby, her ancient face creased with worry. "How is she?" Alindra asked, rushing to the bedside. "The High Matriarch is stable but weak," Narration replied. "She collapsed 3 days ago without warning. We have found no natural cause for her condition." "No natural cause," Alindra repeated slowly, understanding the implication. "You believe she was poisoned?" The healer did not answer, but her silence spoke volumes over the following days. Alindra discovered just how dangerous things had become. Lord Kethrin, a rival noble who had long coveted the throne, had been consolidating power while the High Matriarch lay unconscious. He controlled nearly half the noble houses now, either through alliance or intimidation, and his ambitions were becoming more obvious by the hour. He requested a formal audience with Alindra, and she had no choice but to accept. Refusing would show weakness, and weakness in this world was an invitation to destruction. Kithrin was tall even by Versian standards, his dark blue skin marked with the ceremonial scars of a warrior caste. He smiled when he saw her, but there was no warmth in his golden eyes. "Princess Alindra," he said smoothly, "how wonderful to see you return from your adventures among the humans. I trust you found their primitive world entertaining." "I found their world enlightening," Alindra replied carefully. "They have much to teach us about courage and honor." Kethrin laughed, a cold sound that echoed through the audience chamber. "Honor?" "Yes, I have heard about your little life debt situation. How embarrassing it must be, bound by ancient law to some common human soldier." Alindra felt her anger rise but kept her expression neutral. "The soldier you mock saved my life when your hired raiders attacked Vega 7. The words hung in the air between them, and she saw Kethrin's mask slip for just a moment. Surprise and then fury flashed across his features before he regained control. "A serious accusation," he said quietly. "I hope you have evidence to support such a claim." I have my suspicions, Alindra replied. And I intend to find proof. Catherine stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that only she could hear. You should be careful, Princess. Your grandmother is dying, your family's power is fading, and you have no allies strong enough to protect you. Perhaps you should consider a different path. What path would that be? Alindra demanded. Marriage, Catherine said simply. A union between our houses would end the conflict before it begins. I would become ruler, yes, but you would remain princess, protected and honored. It is a generous offer, considering your weakened position. Alindra looked at him with disgust she could not hide. I would rather die than bind myself to a murderer and a traitor, she said clearly, loudly enough for the nearby courtiers to hear. Catherine's expression hardened into something dangerous. Then you may get your wish, he said softly. Sooner than you think. Far across the galaxy? Daniel Carter was going crazy with boredom and worry. His wounds had healed enough for him to move freely, but the military had not yet cleared him for active duty. And every day without news from Alindra made him more anxious. He had tried to contact her through official channels, but his messages went unanswered. The Versian diplomatic corps claimed the Princess was busy with family matters and could not be disturbed then. Admiral Nathan Cross appeared at his door. Cross was a human military attaché who had been assigned to the Versian Dominion for the past 5 years. He was gray-haired and sharp-eyed, the kind of officer who saw everything and said little. Sergeant Carter, he said, I think we need to talk. Over coffee at the kitchen table, Cross explained the situation. Intelligence reports suggested that a coup was being planned within the Dominion, and Princess Alindra was in serious danger. Lord Catherine had been identified as the likely instigator, and his connections to the Kreth Raiders were becoming impossible to ignore. Why are you telling me this? Daniel asked. Because you are the only human who has a personal connection to the princess, Cross replied. And because I know you well enough to know that you are going to try to help her whether I give you permission or not. I would rather you do it with support than alone. Daniel did not bother denying it. He had already been thinking about how to reach the Dominion without authorization. What kind of support? He asked. Cross slid a data chip across the table. Travel documents, access codes to the palace based on our diplomatic records, and contact information for loyalist factions within the Dominion who oppose Catherine. It is not much, but it is better than nothing. Why help me? Daniel pressed. This could destroy your career if it goes wrong. Cross smiled grimly. Because the princess is the best hope for improving human-Versian relations. And because I remember what it was like to be young and in love. Now stop wasting time and go save her. Daniel did not bother correcting the Admiral's assumption. He was not entirely sure it was wrong. The journey to Thelvara took 8 days, and every hour felt like an eternity. Daniel used the time to study the palace layouts, memorize the access codes, and practice with the weapons he had smuggled aboard in his diplomatic luggage. When he finally arrived at the Dominion capital, he found a world on the edge of chaos. Soldiers patrolled the streets in numbers he had not expected, and fear was visible on the faces of civilians who hurried past without making eye contact. He made his way to the palace through back channels and servant entrances, using the codes Cross had provided. It was risky, but he had no choice. Alindra found him waiting in her private chambers. And for a moment, she could only stare. Daniel, she whispered, what are you doing here? You cannot be here. It is too dangerous. I heard you were in trouble, he replied simply. Did you really think I would stay away? This is not your fight, she insisted. Catherine is moving against my family. He has soldiers everywhere. If he finds you here, he will kill you without hesitation. Then we better make sure he does not find me. Daniel said, I am not leaving, Alindra. You can argue with me if you want, but it will not change anything. She stared at him with those violet eyes he had thought about every day since she left Iowa. Why? She asked, echoing the question she had posed on that farmhouse porch. Why risk yourself again for someone who is not your responsibility? Daniel stepped closer and took her hands in his. You do not get to decide what risks I take, he said gently. That is not how friendship works. And whether you believe it or not, we are friends now. I care about what happens to you. Tears glistened in Alindra's eyes, but she blinked them away. Then help me, she said, her voice steadying with determination. Help me gather evidence against Kethran and stop his coup before it is too late. That is exactly what I came here to do, Daniel replied. They worked through the night, piecing together information from loyal servants and intercepted communications. The picture that emerged was damning. Kethran had indeed hired the Kreth raiders to kidnap Alindra, planning to force her into marriage and claim the throne. When that plan failed, thanks to Daniel's intervention, he had turned to poison and political manipulation instead. But before they could bring their evidence to the council, the palace shook with the sound of explosions. Kethran had launched his coup. Soldiers stormed the corridors. Loyal guards fell defending their posts, and chaos consumed the ancient halls of power. Daniel grabbed Alindra and tried to reach an escape route, but they were cut off at every turn. When the soldiers finally cornered them, Alindra was dragged away, screaming his name while Daniel was beaten, unconscious by Kethran's guards. The last thing he heard before darkness claimed him was Kethran's cold laughter echoing through the smoke-filled halls. Daniel woke to pain and darkness, his wrists bound and his body aching from the beating he had received. He was in some kind of storage room, judging by the crates stacked around him, and a single flickering light cast shadows that danced across the walls. He tested his bonds and found them secure. Whoever had tied him knew what they were doing. The door opened, and a Vortian guard stepped inside. But instead of the cruelty Daniel expected, the guard's expression was conflicted, almost sympathetic. The human is awake, the guard called over his shoulder. And a moment later, another figure entered, Thalric, Alindra's personal guard. You, Daniel said with surprise. I thought you hated humans. I do, Thalric replied without emotion. But I hate traitors more. Kethran has violated every principle our people hold sacred, and the princess believes you can help stop him. For her sake, I will set aside my feelings. He produced a blade and cut Daniel's bonds. The princess? Daniel asked urgently as he rubbed feeling back into his wrists. Where is she? Is she safe? For now, Thalric said grimly. Kethran plans to force her into marriage before the assembled nobles within the hour. Once the ceremony is complete, his claim to the throne will be legitimate, and no one will be able to challenge him. Daniel's blood ran cold. They had less than an hour to stop a coup and save Alindra from a fate worse than death. Show me the way to the throne room, he demanded. Thalric handed him a weapon, a Vortian energy pistol that felt strange but familiar in his hands. Follow me, the guard said, and try not to die before we reach her. I did not want to explain to the princess how I lost her human. They moved through the palace corridors like ghosts, avoiding patrols and using servant passages that Thalric knew from years of service. The sounds of celebration echoed from somewhere ahead. The false joy of nobles who had chosen to support Kethran rather than risk his wrath. The throne room doors loomed before them, guarded by 4 soldiers in ceremonial armor. Thalric did not hesitate. He attacked with the speed and precision of a trained warrior, and within seconds, all 4 guards lay unconscious on the marble floor. You could have mentioned you were that good, Daniel muttered. You never asked. Thalric replied. They burst through the doors into a scene that made Daniel's stomach turn. The throne room was filled with nobles in their finest robes, all watching as Kethran stood before the ancient altar with Alindra at his side. She wore a wedding gown of silver and white, but her eyes were dead. and her wrists bore the marks of restraints only recently removed. Thrawn was speaking the ceremonial words of binding when Daniel's voice cut through the chamber. "Stop!" Every head turned toward the entrance. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd as they recognized the human soldier who had become famous across the galaxy. Thrawn's face twisted with fury. "Kill him!" Guards rushed forward, but Daniel was already moving. He fired his weapon with precision learned through years of military training, dropping soldiers before they could reach him. Thalric fought at his back, covering his blind spots and keeping the path clear. Alindra used the chaos to act. She grabbed a ceremonial blade from the altar and swung it at Kethran, forcing him to stumble backward. The noble's confident smirk vanished as he realized his carefully planned coup was falling apart. "You think you can stop me?" Kethran snarled, drawing his own weapon. "I have waited years for this moment. I will not be denied by a foolish princess and her human pet." He lunged at Alindra with murder in his eyes, but Daniel was faster. He threw himself between them, taking the slash meant for her across his arm. Blood sprayed across the white marble floor, and pain exploded through his body, but he did not fall. He grabbed Kethran's as-weapon arm and twisted, forcing the traitor to drop his blade. They grappled for a moment before Daniel landed a punch that sent Kethran staggering. "You should have stayed on your primitive little planet." Kethran spat, blood dripping from his lip. "You do not belong here. You are nothing but a savage animal pretending to be civilized." "Maybe," Daniel replied, breathing hard. "But this animal just ruined your day." Kethran reached for a hidden blade in his belt and lunged again. But this time, Alindra was ready. She moved with the grace of someone trained in combat since childhood, stepping between them and driving her ceremonial blade into Kethran's shoulder. The traitor screamed and fell to his knees, clutching his wounded arm. Guards loyal to the true throne finally broke through and surrounded him, their weapons trained on his heart. "It is over, Kethran," Alindra said coldly. "Your coup has failed. Your conspiracy is exposed. You will face justice for your crimes against the Dominion and against my family." Kethran looked up at her with hatred burning in his eyes, but he had no more words. His power was broken, and everyone in the room knew it. The nobles who had supported him began to distance themselves, their survival instincts overriding their earlier loyalty. By morning, Kethran would have no eyes left, and his name would become a symbol of shame. Daniel swayed on his feet, the blood loss from his wound finally catching up to him. Alindra caught him before he could fall, her arms wrapping around him with surprising strength. "You fool," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You beautiful, reckless fool. You almost died for me again. Seemed like the thing to do." Daniel managed with a weak smile. She laughed through her tears, a sound of pure relief and something deeper. "The life debt is fulfilled," she said softly. "I saved your life as you saved mine. We are even now." Daniel looked up at her, his vision swimming but his mind clear. "So what happens now?" he asked. "Now that you are free of your obligation?" Alindra was silent for a long moment, her violet eyes searching his face as if looking for an answer to a question she had not yet asked. "I have been thinking about that," she admitted. "For 3,000 years, my people have believed that debts must be paid, that honor demands repayment for every sacrifice. But you taught me something different. What is that?" Daniel asked that some bonds are not about debt at all. She said, "Some bonds are chosen, freely and willingly, without obligation or ancient law. My duty to you is complete, Daniel Carter, but my feelings are not." She took his hand, the same gesture he had offered her on that Iowa farmhouse porch, what felt like a lifetime ago. "Stay," she said simply. "Not because you owe me anything, not because I owe you. Stay because I want you here, and because I hope you want to be here too." Daniel smiled, the pain in his arm forgotten. "I thought you would never ask," he replied 6 months later. Daniel Carter stood in the same throne room where he had once fought for his life. But the circumstances could not have been more different. He wore the ceremonial robes of an official ambassador, and beside him stood Alindra, her hand in his, as the High Matriarch herself blessed their union. The old queen had recovered fully once Catherine's poison was identified and treated. She had opposed the match at first, as everyone expected. But Alindra's determination and Daniel's proven loyalty had eventually won her over. "You have brought great honor to the Dominion," the High Matriarch said, looking at Daniel with something approaching respect. "And you have taught my granddaughter that true strength comes not from ancient laws, but from the bonds we choose to forge. For that, you have my gratitude." Daniel bowed his head in acknowledgement. Celebration that followed was unlike anything Earth had ever seen. Human diplomats mingled with Vertian nobles, and for the first time in history, two species found common ground not through treaties or trade agreements, but through a simple love story that had captured the imagination of billions. Grace Carter danced with Thalric, who had reluctantly agreed to attend after Alindra insisted. The warrior looked deeply uncomfortable, but Grace's enthusiasm was impossible to resist. Commander Bennett raised a toast to the happy couple, and Admiral Cross watched from the sidelines with a satisfied smile. Later that night, Daniel and Alindra stood together on a balcony overlooking the glittering capital city. The stars spread above them like diamonds on velvet. "Do you regret it?" Alindra asked softly. "Leaving your homeworld, your family, everything you knew?" Daniel considered the question seriously. "I used to think home was a place," he said finally. "A farmhouse in Iowa, a town where everyone knew my name. But I have learned that home is not about geography. It is about the people who make you feel like you belong." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "You asked me once why I risked my life for you," he continued. "And I said it was because it was the right thing to do. That was true, but it was not the whole truth." "What is the whole truth?" Alindra asked. "That from the moment I saw you in that tunnel, terrified but unbroken, I knew you were worth saving," Daniel replied. "Not because you were a princess, not because of any ancient law, but because you were you. And I would do it all again, 100 times over. If it meant standing here with you now." Alindra smiled, and in her smile, Daniel saw everything he had ever wanted: partnership, understanding, and a love that transcended species and culture and the vast distances between stars. "Then stay with me," she whispered, echoing the words she had spoken in the throne room. "Always," Daniel promised, and as they stood together beneath the alien stars, the human soldier and the Vertian princess, they both understood that their story was just beginning.